friends, it's Sharon Lusky here from My Crafty Greetings, and we're going to do a Scrappy Tales video today. And this is the I Got Framed video. So I'm using the layered Plumeria dies and my favorite little brushes from Amazon. They're the little finger dauber brushes with the bristles on the end. And I just wanted to tell you all, have you seen the J'adore Inspiration Hop? I did this cute little card with this adorable scooter. This is one of the new dies that has just come out from Scrappy Tales. So I will get into that in another video. But I was sitting in the loo checking out my Front Gate magazines, and I was looking at all these frame pictures, and I thought, you know what a focal point those make, and especially if they're layered up, where we can add some texture and definition and just make them a real focal point. So the other thing too here is I have these Plumeria, and if you're going to die cut your pieces out of paper, it is always worthwhile to do a little ink blending on them just to make them pop off the page and really eye-catching when somebody sees them. Now, these Scrappy Tales have a good number of layers to them, and if you don't want to use the layers, you don't have to. There's great ways they can look just as fun. That is my sheet. I washed it off. It is no problem, still sticky. I wanted to show you quickly too these little finger dauber brushes. If you need to get them back together, just tilt them in so that all the bristles are in and give them a little twist. You'll notice that the bristles will slide in, and if you get one particularly stuck, tilt it back a bit and then pop it in. And mine are perfectly fine, even though I have used them quite a bit. So this is where we're headed today. And I cut these out with my Creative Expressions Inside Outside Stitch dies. I forgot most of my dies when I was coming down south. I can't believe it. I got all my Scrappy Tales ones, and then we're gonna be using some embossing folders today to add the texture. And I've cut 3 frames, one slightly larger, and then 2 the same size, one that's just used flat to give the embossed one some support. And this really cool embossing folder, these 2 are new that I got from Gina K. Now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting a finish, just like a furniture finish, and this actually happens to be Valspar furniture finish, which I'm going to recommend that you do not use because it took a long time to dry. But basically you're stroking it on and then dabbing it off to knock it back. Now you may have some glazes in your craft room that you can use, or I'll show you a technique to be able to cheat that. Now I didn't have my ovals here, but luckily I had my A7 pop-up book add-on die set from Scrappy Tales, so I was able to use these dies to go ahead and make myself some frames. And again, 2 of the smaller ones and 1 that's slightly larger so we have a reveal. And then I used this Gingham embossing folder to emboss 1, and then I'm going to give that one a little bit of extra strength by adding it to the same size oval frame piece that I made, and that is going to allow me to faux finish it without it falling apart, because it is going to add a little bit of moisture to the frame. And you can see this is just Nina Solar White 80 pound. So the rectangular frame I already showed you was foil finished, which basically meant it had a plastic coat on it. So I'm going to use some dye ink, Ice Spruce Distress ink specifically, and then you need some sort of medium to mix it with. And this is Gloss Heavy Gel. You can get any type of medium. Glossy accents, I think most of you have, though. The only disadvantage to this is it dries quickly, so you have to work fast or mix yourself in a little tiny bit of water, just a tiny, tiny bit. But you can see here, I'm just squirting it out. Now, most of us have had a bottle that have been around for years. It's good to use it up because it does start to yellow a little tiny bit. That's just the nature of the beast with this type of product. So you're just gonna dab it on quick. Now, I found as I went through this, I didn't quite mix myself enough. One more squeeze probably would have done the job. And I know it's not fun to overuse our products, but this is definitely one that you want to have a little bit more than a little bit less. And then I did the most dumb thing on the planet. Yeah, here we go. So I'm dabbing off the excess from the peak so that the valleys retain the color, and that is drying on that very thin layer of glossy accents that was left over. And anything glossy will stick to anything porous with some glossy accents. It's if you need to stick down rhinestones and things like that, then Glossy Accents is your man for the job. Now this is one of my sticky mats. It's the laminated side. So I'll just clean that off as best as I can, but the sticky side will still work for me, so not to worry. If you can't find an embossing folder that you think will work, you can use a die cut frame too. And if you glue it down, you can still work in color to those nooks and crannies. My frame's not quite dry, so I'm just kind of blocking it back into shape before it does dry. So my experimental misadventures continued. I have this gorgeous stencil woven by Altenew, and I wanted to use it to make some light white markings on this sheet of vellum here. And rather than using my white pigment ink, I thought I would give water-based oil paint a try. And although it really went well through the stencil and it cleaned up out of my brush really, really well, that's what you should use. This is what you should not use. This did not dry for days and days. You'll have no problem cleaning up, but it will never dry for you. Here's one more trick as well. If you don't want to do the full assembly of the Plumeria, I take the leaves and just kind of pull them off, and then I also use pops of color. I've got white, and you don't need to have every color. You can just take a marker that is alcohol-based and color the white in once it's dry. Make sure it's dry or you'll ruin your marker. So I'm going to assemble this frame together. I like to put it the opposite way around first so that I can eyeball how it lines up. I find if I quickly visualize how it's supposed to go together before I actually put it together, I have an easier time lining it up. It's a good thing to practice. The more times you line something up, the easier it's going to be. I added a little homemade foam with packing foam and Xyron sheets to the back of my frame. Makes it nice and thin with a little dimension. And I've got the Fairy Sentiment sheet here, the Fairy Sentiment stamp set here. It has a ton of really fantastic, good size sentiments on it. I love this. And my fiddle fingers are hard at work sticking the lid in the watering can archival ink before I can get this stamped out. And I'm just trimming it down so that it's nice and thin, putting a little bit of that homemade packing foam tape on the back of my sentiment here, and I'm going to fishtail it so that I can stick it on. I also really love that Scripty birthday sentiment die. That's a new one that I just got myself from Gina K. I think it's just gorgeous. Added some rhinestones, and here we are. It's a little bit overexposed in yellow, but you get the idea. I'm not quite got the hang of taking pictures here in the full sunlight of Myrtle Beach. Okay, so next card here, I'm ink blending the outside edges of a 5x7 gray sheet of cardstock. And here's the return of the vellum that wouldn't dry. I shook some white embossing powder over it and heat set it. And this is just going to be a little too intense to combine with this frame. And I really wanted to combine the layering orchid die set with it, but without the bottom part of the orchid. So I went ahead and used the same woven stencil from Altenew and a piece of vellum and put myself some acrylic paint through it instead. It worked out much better, and then I scrunched it up to give it a really worn look. I added some tape runner to the back of the largest oval, and then I'm just going to trim behind to get rid of the extra vellum. I burnished it in place so it would stick well. Now I'm adding some ATG to that piece that we made to go to the front of the frame, and I'm lining that up to make sure it has that nice white reveal in the center. Adding some more ATG so we can stick it to the background here. And then I decided to get out a thick foam sheet and some cake decorating tools from the dollar store just to work a little extra dimension into these orchids. And I've already got the layers glued on that make those beautiful little yellow centers, and I used some pigment white ink in the center of the flowers just to give them that extra little two-tone. It's good to flip your flowers forwards and backwards so that they have a good change in the dimension of the way the petals turn. You can see here, once I add in the lines of where the petals meet, it's actually going to make it look like a much more realistic looking flower. And it really does look a lot better when you put something that's been sculpted on your project versus something that's just plain old flat. Now I like to take the tip and just punch around the centers of the orchids so that the centers really pop up. And you can see here how pretty that looks with that frame. It's like a vignette that you'd see in that beautiful magazine. Here it is sculpted and then flat and sculpted again. You can see the difference that extra little bit of effort makes. Now the other thing too that I didn't like, and I'm suffering from the boring background syndrome. Every time I look at a background on my cards lately, I just keep feeling like they need more. So I'm splattering on some Spectrum Noir shimmer pen. You can also get a great pen from scrapbook.com that will do this, or if you've got some watercolor and white shimmer, that'll work too. and I still can't get past this piece that I was going to abandon, so we'll come back to that one later. But you can see here how nicely those are. I added a little swirly curlies in the background, and I'm also adding in some nice gemstones here. I'm blinging everything up. It's the mood I'm in today. I also cut this panel down, the gray panel down, 1/4 inch on each side so that I could just have a little bit of a white reveal from my card base. And yeah, I think that turned out pretty good. That's for my Auntie Gwen's birthday. Anyways, if you don't want to do the mucking about with faux finishing, I have the Ornate Swirls paper rose die here, and I used it to cut out the inside rectangle there on the gray, and then of course the swirls rectangle frame, and that's a nice substitute too. Fast and easy way if you don't want to go mixing things and getting inks out, but you can put it together and still get that framed look. And then I use that gorgeous Celebrate from Altenew. Now the A7 pop-up book die set has these gorgeous frames that I am so in love with, and I went ahead and just cut out a gray backer frame with my stitched rectangles, and then I've got my glossy accents out and a little bit of mica powder here. This is that coarse mica powder that I talked about in a previous video. I'm still trying to get my stuff together to get that sorted, but anyways, I'm mixing some water and the glossy accents together, and I'm just gonna brush this over, and it's gonna make it have a really, really cool kind of technique to finish. Really neat, different looking frame. And then I also took and put some Scripty stamp on. I now use this Hero Arts Scripty stamp because the other one you can't get anymore, but this is a good one to get. And then I just used my frame upside down and my unicorn white ink and that brush finger dauber, and just did like a faux bokeh finish on the background there by dabbing that brush down. Gives some great circles. So itself a great technique. And then a little bit of ATG or glue, tape runner, whatever you want to call it. And then I'm pulling together the speedy version of the Plumeria. So this is no layers, it's just some daubs of color pops, and I colored them in with some marker, and then the leaves that I just ripped off that arrangement. So then I can do anything I want with that. And you know what, it actually looks quite cool with just the flowers, but I'm gonna glue the leaves that I pulled off. I'm gonna glue those down first, and then I'll just make a nest of the flowers over top. And really, honestly, if you get a bed of leaves, almost like you're pretending to be a floral artist. If you get the leaves kind of arranged and just put a dab of glue on the back. I know Desiree Comerly that does the tangles with paper, include a thank you and then some. She has some really cool thick glue that I think I'm gonna use her link and try. And I like it because it looks like it keeps your leaves and your flowers in place, but I'm just using some art glitter glue here, and I'm putting a big enough kind of daub on the back that once I set these down, they're just gonna kind of fuse themselves all together onto this, and it's just like a big dot in the center of the base of the leaf or in the center of the flower. Anyways, if you've made it this far, I sure would love it if you would give me a thumbs up, if you would subscribe to my channel if you haven't. You're gonna miss out on so many crazy shenanigans that I get up to. And as well, if you would leave me a comment, because it really helps with the algorithm and it makes me so happy to read them. It keeps my crafty mojo going. Now, I just couldn't leave that paper piece that we used the water soluble oil paint and then put the embossing powder, white embossing powder over. So I just ripped a rough edge and put that on nice dark charcoal gray piece of paper. And I've only put dots of ATG behind, or not ATG, Tombow Mono Multi behind it, so that it will stick down. I let it dry before I put the paper in place. And then I did the same thing too with the orchid arrangement here and put the Tombow Mono Multi on the back and allowed it to dry. Scrapbook.com has a cool glue too that's very similar to that. If you want to get a smaller bottle, it's a little cheaper. And then this gorgeous happy birthday die that comes from Picket Fence Studios. Love it. It's amazing. And then a smattering of gems. So those are my framed up cards, and hopefully you'll start to use some fancy frames in some of your card making. Thank you so much for joining me and have an awesome day. Thanks. Bye.